Welcome back, everybody. Appreciate you coming by. We are going to be breaking down the UFC 296 card for the Pilsners and Prelims UFC Betting Podcast. I'm here at Andy HH Sports, and with me is my counterpart, Rick, at Rick HH Sports. We are the Pilsners and Prelim tandem that represent the UFC betting portion of Happy Hour Sports. If you haven't been with us before, quick little recap of what the podcast is. Essentially, we break down every single fight of every single UFC fight card in 5-minute segments, just like a 5-minute round in mixed martial arts. We're going to be breaking it down 5 minutes here. We might not be in an octagon, but hopefully we can make you feel like it with the horn indicating the 5 minutes are up. And at the end of the horn, we'll be giving our picks, just like you'll hear the decision or Bruce Buffer telling you who got the finish. Rick, how you doing? I know we took last week off, but hopefully it was enough time to get you ready for this card if the card wasn't exciting enough for you. I mean, this could be the card of the year that we have in our hands to end it in December, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, man, I'm doing well. We had a fun trip to Green Bay the other weekend. Sunday night was a hell of a game. We watched a good bit of tape coming back, and unfortunately I had a DMV issue where I had to drive 2 hours, and we ended up just calling the pod. But it ended up being a better fight card than I expected it to be. But I mean, as they tend to go, the ones with the least amount of names end up having the most fun fights. But it did give me more time to prep for this fight card, and I'm excited. I mean, there's a couple fights after looking into it that aren't as exciting, but I think 90% of these fights are amazing. And we'll get to those fights, and then you'll hear which ones I'm talking about. But I mean, you've got from the first fight of the night with Randy Brown and Muslim Salikov, all the way to the end with Leon Edwards and Colby Covington. It should be fireworks throughout. Even the fights that aren't as exciting, those fights will probably get a finish. So you're probably getting excited in some form or fashion. So. Fantastic card. I'm pumped for it, man. The last card of the year is always a fun one because there's 4 weeks off after this, which is sad. So we'll have to find something to watch. But
college football bowl games will take over our time as we do have a college football bowl special coming to Happy Hour Sports World. You will be able to see every single bowl game written out with a preview as we head into the first batch of them this Saturday, December 16th. So I'm really excited for that. We're bringing everybody on board from all of our writers on the Happy Hour Sports team to highlight each and every single bowl game that's going to be happening. They'll be giving their pick for the game as well as their betting expertise if they have it. So that will at least help fill up our time. Rick, to your point about this card, I think from a betting angle here, this is where I'm certainly perplexed. We have a lot of guys that are in this weird range where it's like you're about 2 steps away from typical pick'em odds. So we've got a lot of favorites that are like in that minus 160 to minus 190 range. That makes it a bit risky to just take one side without some kind of stipulation in there. I did take the plunge on 1 or 2, and we'll see that when we get there. But I do think that it is interesting that there are no real pick'ems on this one. It is somebody is a decently sized favorite, enough where you can still bet on it, but enough that if you lose one, it kind of sets you back where you have to win 2 fights or win a significant underdog to kind of recoup the money that you lose on one of these favorites.
Yeah, there are. And I enjoy those types of fights because typically, like, I mean, at least the way I see it, there's typically in those minus 200, like minus 160 lines, like a distinct advantage for one guy, but there's that big caveat. There's that big hole in their game that gives like enough pause to where it's like, well, I don't know, or he's regressing. The case of Cody Garbrandt. Where he's minus 205, but it's like, all right, well, is he going to have the same speed? Is that going to continue to translate? Is the wrestling of Kelleher going to be able to get to him? And there's many other fights like that, but yeah, it's exciting because you definitely can rip them straight up. And while it is juicier than any of us want to lay, sometimes the juice has to be laid. Sometimes there's value on a minus 200 guy because he should be minus 250, minus 300. You never know. But sometimes you just got to lay the juice all over him and just go from there. So that's how it is. But should be fun fights. We got 14 fights, 9 on the prelims, 5 obviously on the main card. That main card starts with everyone's favorite, Ian Machado Gary, the fan favorite at the moment. Everyone loves him. Everyone's talking about him for better or for worse. And then for worse, somehow in his shadow is Paddy Pimblett. Somehow the forgotten man of this card is a little bit Paddy Pimblett. It's a little weird how quiet he's going because we all know just how ridiculous he's going to be fight night when he's doing the jig in there after he sleeps Tony Ferguson, and he's just going to twerk on Tony Ferguson. It's going to be horrible.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think Patty kind of found himself in Ian Gary's shoes last year at this time after Patty was really slamming the media, was really talking a lot of shit, and was rubbing people the wrong way with some of the things that he was saying heading into that fight against Jared Gordon. And then Jared Gordon probably should have won that fight. Actually, he really should have won that fight. It was one of those Dana White privileged decisions to Patty Pimblett. So now Gary finds himself in those shoes, and I'll touch on it a bit when we get to that preview. I'm very excited to talk about it, but as you can see by my nickname in the on StreamYard today. But I really do think that there is a angle here where you could make an argument for Luque because of all the outside noise, not just all the outside noise and fighting aside. And that's something that's a little underrated to talk about in the octagon. But again, we'll get there when we get there. 2 awesome title fights with Leon Rocky Edwards taking on Colby Chaos Covington, as well as Alexandre Pantoja taking on Brandon Raw Dog Royval. Royval may as well have Chaos as his nickname because Covington's not really bringing nearly as much chaos as Raw Dog does in the octagon.
No, man. I'm excited to get in that one. I'm going to wait and touch on that one, but that's going to be a fun fight because, I mean, you know as well as anybody, Andy, I rode Pantoja all the way to the top. And I may continue to here, but we'll see. That's going to be – I mean, the flyweight division is just the most fun to watch, in my opinion. Those guys are just so fast and slippery. They don't have the knockout power, but they're going to give you entertainment for sure. So, huge fights all up and down the card. I'm Wonder Boy Thompson for the day, local South Carolinian, down the road from me. Just about 30 minutes away in Simpsonville. I'm up in Greenville, so excited to see him. Hopefully he doesn't get slept. There's a good chance he does. More than a good chance. There's a great chance. But we'll cheer him on nonetheless. We'll see if my money follows my heart there, but probably not.
Definitely a lot of passing of the guard.
Oh, yeah, it is a passing of the guard. And hopefully Rachmanov gets where Stephen Wonderboy Thompson could never get, which is a championship belt. But that's to be seen. 17-0. Let's see if he can keep the 0. But let's get into the main card. Let's get into those prelims. Let's not jump all the way to the main card. Let's get into the prelims. We'll start with Randy Brown and Muslim Salikov. Hell of a matchup. We'll see you there. Thanks for tuning in again to another episode of the Pilsners and Prelims Podcast out of Happy Hour Sports. Make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the message or enjoyed the podcast. And be sure to tune in to our future videos as we break down each and every UFC card each week. Looking forward to seeing you then, and thanks again for the support. Appreciate it.
And our first fight of the night is in the welterweight division as we have Randy Rude Boy Brown taking on Muslim Salikov. I think that this fight is going to end up being the winner heads into the rankings of the welterweight division of the top 15 and what has been a quite inactive top 15 of ranks in this division, which is unfortunate because there's a lot of fun names, but I digress. The loser here probably is going to be put up into some more awkward fights where they'll be getting some of the up-and-comers, some of the contenders, and due to their ages, that's kind of how it goes. Randy Brown's been in the UFC for a long time now. I mean, he feels like he could be some prospect from how exciting he still is, but he's 11-5 in the UFC, Rick. And his losses really have only come up against some of the top names, which I think is definitely in his favor. We're talking about Jack Della Maddalena most recently, as well as a loss to Vicente Luque, who's on the main card against the Wag Boy himself, as well as Bilal Muhammad, who could potentially be on the card if something happens to Colby or Leon, as he was announced earlier this week to be the backup fighter in the welterweight title fight headlining main event. With Randy Brown, what I like about his game is his solid timing. I feel like he's very, very strong with his boxing, and I think that he should be able to outpace Salikov because we've kind of seen Salikov's pace slow down over the last few fights. He is reliant on that wrestling and then the counter striking. And I do think that Randy Brown checks the advantages in age. So, yes, I did say Randy Brown is getting a little bit older than you would expect from someone who kind of pops around on fight nights like he does. But Salikov is at the ripe age of 38, which is a noticeable increase for people to get knocked out historically. We see 38 as kind of that magic number where a lot of guys deteriorate in their level of chin. And, I mean, as I stated, their level of pace, too. So I love the speed mismatch here for Rude Boy, but interested to hear what you have.
Yeah, I like Rude Boy in this fight as well. I can get straight to that, but the pace that the pace that Salikov can put on is really going to be the X factor here. I mean, at 39 years old, like you said, he is slowing down. The King of Kung Fu is his nickname, and he likes to wrestle, as you mentioned, but he really isn't. I mean, he's not phenomenal at it. And he's going to probably use it to his detriment here because Brown, though his boxing and his calf kicks are a staple of his game, his wrestling is very underutilized. That's sort of where he came from. And he has submissions in his back pocket. He's got 5 today, 6 knockouts, 6 decisions. So as people like to say, a balanced fighter, sometimes that can be misleading. But he definitely has it. He's got the wrestling. But really, I think it's going to be the boxing and the jabs and being able to establish range here with that 8-inch reach advantage here in this fight. Should be able to keep him at range. But the kicking of Salikov is a different level. His spinning kicks, his spinning attacks are fantastic. They're fun to watch. But as I said, those are very, very high energy movements. And at 39 years old, with the pace, with his speed slowing down, and with that, I really struggle to see him having some success here. He's lost 2 of 3 fights now. One was to the Leech. The Leech himself is regressing. He got hit with a 3-4 punch combo and then was dropped. Got ground and pounded out of that fight and finished. And then Dalby just put a pace on him that he couldn't match. And now Randy Brown, pace wise, he doesn't have the greatest cardio in the world. It's not bad. It's not a weakness. But even then, it might look like he's going to be able to put the pace on a guy like Salikov if we get to that 3rd round. But the odds sort of reflect what we're saying too. They've got it at Brown minus 245, Salikov plus 210. Last I looked, and that might have moved. Let me check.
It's around the same range, I believe.
Oh, where is it?
Yeah, Randy Brown's still around minus 270 to 265, depending on where you're shopping. Actually, you can get him at minus 260 on Caesars.
Yeah, I was about to say it's moved up. So Browns continue to be the favorite. So if you're on the Brown side, like we seem to be, or like I am, Andy might be, you probably want to get in sooner rather than later. But it should be an interesting fight. Andy, where do you officially go, and sort of final thoughts on the fight?
Yeah, so I thought you gave some really good insight there. I love the value on this fight to not go the distance, where I think that Brown by sub is an interesting prop. I also think that if Muslim catches him at the wrong time, he could put his lights out. I'm not going to dive into those markets just yet. I'm going to go with Brown to win the fight. So he's going to be my pick for this fight, as well as I have Brown as a parlay leg at minus 260, which I will be putting him into a 2-leg parlay, which you will see the second leg later on in the prelims. So make sure to stay locked in with us as we continue on with our preview here. Rick, who do you have?
Yeah, so I've got Brown. I just think the speed and range to pair with that grappling is going to be the difference. If he stays at the kicking range and isn't able to establish his jab, he could have some problems. But I think that his camp's going to be smart and not making sure that he's not there. But I like your point about the fight not to go the distance. That's my official bet, and I will be locking it in now. I was looking at it last night at minus 115. It's now up to about minus 125. So I'm going to get it before it gets too expensive. But yeah, I like one of these guys to finish the other, either Brown exhausting Salikov with that range, or potentially a submission as well. But Salikov's always ripe for a finish himself with that kickboxing and those spinning kicks. So find out to go the distance for me. Andy's got Brown in a parlay leg. We're both going Brown in the fight. And we will see you at the next fight for Shamil Gaziev versus Martin Buday.
Coming up next in the heavyweight division, we have Shamil Gaziev taking on Martin Buday. Buday is 4-0 in the UFC following his 2021 bout in the Dana White Contender Series. He really uses his body weight in his fights, and he presses forward on you, which makes for a really grindy fight in the heavyweight division where you're kind of used to guys just slugging and putting one another's lights out. Gaziev, on the other hand, I find it quite interesting. So also a Dana White Contender Series alum. He got his Dana White Contender Series, then UFC contract in August, I believe, and now is getting a top 20 heavyweight fight right after. So, Rick, I guess my question here is, this guy's getting the Bo Nickel privilege we thought Bo Nickel was going to get in a much less deep middleweight division. I don't know what's up with that. I don't know how he's going straight into the top 20 of the division, but anywho, I think that Gaziev, with him, it's going to be if he can get the takedown. Because once he gets the takedown, he keeps you down. He packs power, but he also gets and he can also knock you over. But I think he can also get knocked over. So he's going to gas out after that first round, and that's why I lean Buday here. But want to hear more what you think about this one, because for me, this is probably the least interesting fight on the card, if I have to say so myself. There's a lot more on there that make up the rest of the card that I'm way more excited to see.
Yeah, I mean, I'm right there with you. This is the fight that I was referencing at the very beginning when I was saying, well, there's a couple fights when right when you look at it a little bit deeper, it's not as good. And this is that one. I mean, they're combined 24-1, but by no means are these good fighters that will ever challenge for the title. Both are starting to age as well, with I think both being 32. Budai being 32 and Gaziev being 33. But neither really wow you. Gaziev does not move his head at all, and he's got low cardio. He doesn't move his head at all, but he also keeps his hands down. So not like 30 seconds in the fight when he's tired. No, he keeps his hands down from the start. And he moves forward with his head on the center line. And somehow I think that Budai might not be the heavyweight to be able to catch him there. Because Budai just doesn't throw with a bunch of power behind it for a heavyweight. It's more volume. It's more leaning on you and just being able to just tire the opponent out. And that's exactly what he did against Jake Collier in their fight. He lost the first round, had some success there, but lost the first round. And then the second round, he really got it going with the clinch with knees in the middle to Collier that really started to damage him and exhaust him. And that's how I see him winning if he beats Gaziev. Gaziev is just going to march forward and try to either take him down, like you said, and implement that ground and pound, which I think is his best weapon, is that ground and pound from top control. He's great at putting his weight on guys and just not allowing them to move at all. But even on that regional scene, when he fought, blanking on his first name, but Stosic, I mean, he looked gigantic in that fight. But the issue was he got dropped 90 seconds into that fight because he didn't move his head. He got hit with a clean left hook, dropped. He did well to get back up and clinch to recover. And they ended up knocking him out with a clean uppercut up the middle. But there's so many red flags when it comes to Gaziev defensively. That I have trouble backing him against an established UFC fighter that's fought not amazing fighters, but respectable fighters, Chris Barnett, Lucas Brzeski, which that fight was a weird fight. That was an odd fight. But Jake Collier, and then he finished Josh Parisian last fight to go 4-0 in the UFC. And is really impressed in that regard. And he's got his own offensive wrestling to go with that clinch work. So he could be the one to maybe reverse a takedown and be able to get on top and do some weight that way. But
I agree with you. The names aren't like super impressive, but they are names. And I think like to your point, or I guess to what we've said about the heavyweight division here, like the heavyweight division, the depth of it has kind of sucked where there's not been a ton of great guys. Like if you are worth a damn in one area of mixed martial arts that you can absolutely excel in, then you are going to rise up the ranks really quick in heavyweight. But to your point, like, yes, the quality of those guys aren't great, but that's kind of what heavyweight is. Like, I don't know who else he could really get that early on unless he's getting gifted a top 20 fight in his first one like Gaziev. But yeah, I agree with what you're saying.
Yeah, to your point, too, about like the fighters at heavyweight that need to have that one skill that is just so dominant compared to others. Like, this is the one weight class where if you are just an amazing striker or an elite grappler like Jailton Almeida, like you can really start to ascend because other guys either gas out or they don't have the technical ability. Like, Martin Boudet's talent is almost his cardio and just like pressure, almost like an Andrei Arlovsky type way where he's just going to continue just to wear on you and be there. He's just going to be durable. You're not going to shut his lights out. He's just going to continue to be right in front of your face until you just can't take it anymore. And I mean, he could very easily do that to Shamil Gaziev, who did not wow me on the scene. And that's why I've got Boudet in this fight. I'm not putting a bet on this fight. I'll probably will right before the fight, but I'm not going to endorse it and lose a unit or two. Absolutely not. Where are you going, Andy?
Yeah, we are on the exact same page. I feel like Boudet has the experience. I also think he's going to apply that pressure on Gaziev and make this big Bahrainian boy crumble. So give me Boudet, however the hell you say it. I will probably be either getting food or grabbing a drink during this one, but at least I'll catch the second and third round, unless it ends in the first. I'm not super excited for this one, but definitely a good fight to gear up for the rest of them. Because coming up next, Rick, we've got Andre Touchy-Feely taking on Lucas Almeida at featherweight, which seems to be an electric one. Keep it locked in with us as we continue on with our preview of UFC 296.
With the third fight of the night, we've got Andre Touchy-Feely coming up against UFC relative newcomer Lucas Almeida. Almeida now in his third UFC fight. Andre Feely coming into his 20th UFC fight, which is crazy to say because The guy still doesn't feel that old. At 33, he still looks young, and maybe that's just the nature of the featherweight division and just being a little bit smaller. But, I mean, he looks like he's still with it and got that speed. Been very up and down throughout his career, and lately it's been down. He's 2-4 in his last 6 UFC fights. But really, it's a product of the competition that he's faced. All of those losses to very, very elite fighters. Sadiq Youssef is probably his worst loss there, and that says something. Because afterwards, you've got Bryce Mitchell, Joe Anderson Burrito, and Nathaniel Wood, who are all losses. But in the middle, he beat Bill Algeo and Charles Jourdain. But it is worth noting that both of those wins came by split decision. So a little bit more, or a little bit less convincing than you might have wished. But when it comes to Andre Fili, it's the jab. The jab starts everything else. And it's thrown with ease. It's thrown quickly. It's snapping. And he's able to hand it right in your nose pretty much every time. He's going to be able to switch stances throughout the fight. And he's a good wrestler. He doesn't like to use it. And what I love about it the most is that he's able to weaponize it only opportunistically, in the sense that he's not going to go looking for double legs a ton. But if he's forced into it, or if the opportunity arises where his opponent extends himself, he's more than happy to do it. And that's given him success against other wrestlers and other really elite grapplers that I think could give him some success in this matchup. And for Almeida, I'll let you add some color to this, or to both, obviously, but to Almeida as well. But he's all fire. He's going to give you everything until he can't give it anymore. And which you don't see as much at the featherweight division. That tends to come more once you get past lightweight and more. But he's gonna give you everything until he can't anymore. And then he'll either knock you out or he'll get slept more times than not. Now, he's got some submissions as well, but all 14 of his victories have come by finish. And so, Andy, what do you see with Almeida there, and where do you think he could be able to trouble the vet and Fili?
Yeah, I think his recent switch to featherweight is very interesting, where he lost his Dana White Contender Series fight in 2021 to Daniel Zellhuber. And Zellhuber, obviously a stud that has now kind of been put on our radar over the last 2 years since entering the UFC. And then he made the move down. And since then, he got that win against Trizano, and then he got that loss against Sabatini to an arm triangle choke in the second round, which, I mean, hey, a submission loss to Sabatini, not the worst loss to put on your resume, in my opinion. I think he's got decent jiu-jitsu. He's not a crazy ground threat for Fili, but I do think he can hold his own there. And I know he likes to set up things with his hands first. And that's where I kind of give him the edge over Fili, where I do think that Fili does get a little bit happy with the hands sometimes and needs to rely on that wrestling a little bit more, especially because I do give him that slight edge over Almeida. I just don't know if he's going to or not. I worry that Fili has a lot of MMA miles in the tank because I agree with you. Looks wise and like how he kind of fares speed wise, you would think, yeah, he's still got a lot left, but that is a lot of MMA miles, as many say. And the recent form kind of says that. I know those names in the recent form. I do give a lot of props to that. And I kind of will, I guess, go against myself at times where I do kind of give credit to guys and pick and choose. Hey, they lost to some big names here. Let's take them in this fight. But this one, I'm not really going that way. I think that there's some really good value on Almeida here at plus 155 in one of those fights, like I touched on in the preview for the card at the beginning of the podcast, that this is one of those where if you like one way and like Andre Touchy-Fili, then you're going to have to pay a little bit of a premium compared to a typical pick-em. So I think it should be closer to a pick-em in odds, and I wouldn't be surprised if Fili pulls it out, but I do respect Almeida. I think that he is going to do a really solid job against Fili in this one. I'm going to go with him straight on the money line for half a unit at plus 155 on Caesars. Let me double check to make sure that's the best odds I can get right now because I wrote this last night. It still is. So Caesars' best price at plus 155. A lot of other books have him at plus 145. And I'll be going with that for a half unit, but I don't hate if people want to go with an inside the distance thing because Almeida has never won by decision before, to your point earlier. So I'm going with Almeida in this one. Which way are you going?
Yeah, and I'm going to end up going Fili, but there's definitely some caveats there, and I'm not betting Fili, so it's not a strong lean for me either. But and really the reason for that is that wrestling that Fili has in his back pocket that he can use whenever he gets cracked. Nobody in the featherweight division tends to get knocked out cold unless you're hit clean with something. And while Almeida's got power, he has really struggled with that takedown defense. Pat Sabatini in his second fight, obviously that is Pat Sabatini. Everyone's going to struggle against Pat Sabatini when it comes to wrestling. But he struggled with it on the regional scene against Nico Cuccio, Diego Barbosa. He was taken down multiple times in different fights. And that just tells me that if Fili's able to get it where he wants to and be able to mix it up pretty well, which he's able to, then we could end up seeing a lot of success there for Fili. So I'm going to go with Fili to win the fight, but it would not surprise me in the slightest if he would get slept. Like you said, they about the same age, but the tread on their tires is completely different. Fili has been there. He's been with the best. He's taken damage from Max Holloway, from pretty much every Calvin Kattar, Michael Johnson. Every great featherweight you can imagine. He's pretty much fought and probably lost to, but more often than not lost to. But he's still a very, very respectable fighter. So I lean Fili. My bet's going to be the under 2.5. It's a little juiced at -155. And for featherweight, you don't love that. But you got two guys that can get slept, want to sleep others, and have the submission ability on the ground to be able to get it done. So I think that we're going to have an all-action affair. And for the third fight on a prelim card, when there's a 14-fight card, this is a damn good prelim. So I hope everyone's able to watch this one and be able to get in early because this should be a hell of a fight. But we're split on the pick. Andy going Almeida. I'm going Fili. I've got the under 2.5. He's got Almeida straight up at +150, plus
155 for half a unit.
55 for half a unit. And next up, we've got Tagir Ulanbekov versus Cody Durden. So it should be a heck of a fight again. We'll see you there.
Hey, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to Pilsners and Prelims, a UFC betting podcast by Happy Hour Sports. Just want to ask if you could like and subscribe to the video if you like the content that we're putting out. And be sure to stay tuned to what we have coming up in the future. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you on the other side. Coming up with a flyweight bout at 125 pounds, we have Tagir Ulanbekov taking on Cody Durden. Ulanbekov sitting around that -175 range. Well, we've got Cody Durden. His best price available right now is +150, but a lot of markets will have him around +145 to +140. Ulanbekov has 2 losses. One is to our guy, the legend, Zhalgas Zhumagulov, and another loss is to Tim Elliott, who completely clowned on Tagir. You and I watched that fight together, actually, way back when. And Tagir was around a -235 favorite at the time. I found both of those to be quite interesting. The Zhalgas fight, of course, not in the UFC. The Tim Elliott one was, and Tagir had a lot of hype going into that one. And for me, it's where I find it to be interesting with Tagir's game is he continues to get dropped by guys who are able to find that chink in his armor and break through into some gap or window for him. For Cody Durden, I feel like he has that opportunity. But for me, his advantage that he has in cardio is not necessarily going to be one that Tagir is able to, he's going to be able to take advantage of with Tagir. Sorry, I kind of lost my words there. The other piece with Tagir that I'm really worried about with this one, Rick, is that we're going to put out this podcast and then something's going to happen with Tagir because he has 6 withdrawals since joining the UFC in 2020. So even though he is one of the boys in Khabib's squad, the Khabib and Islam crew, I love watching those guys, especially on social media. It's very funny to watch them interact. But I don't really think he stacks up as well to some of these guys where you're just used to them being an absolute steamroller rolling through these guys in their division. Cody Durden could be another one of those tests that kind of humbles him.
Yeah, this reminds me a lot of that Tim Elliott fight. And the odds are a little bit closer, and that almost seems like an adjustment from the old Tim Elliott fight to say, hey, we're not going to give him that dominant odds, even though he came back and standing guillotined Nate Maness in the first round of his last fight. There are enough question marks now with Ulanbekov. He is not that uber prospect that everyone sort of thought he was coming in, where his grappling is Khabib-esque, even though he trains with Khabib and all those guys. And it is very good. His offensive wrestling is very good. And he's highly skilled. His striking has continued to be more and more effective, but it's weird. He's 32 now. He's only got 3 or 4 fights in the UFC and only 3 fights now in the past 3 years. He's sort of wasting his prime. I say wasting. It's not like he's intentionally doing it, but withdrawing from fights due to injury. And I'm curious to see if his striking has taken levels because you didn't really see it in that Nate Maness fight. And it's been basically 2 years since that Elliott fight. So you got to figure that's really been what he's been working on. But for Cody Durden, it's going to be the same old, same old. And I love Cody Durden. I love and hate Cody Durden. I love Cody Durden for so many things. The only thing I hate him for is that sometimes he's just so corny. Like the entire fight, you're cheering him on because he's a dog. And then afterwards he gets on the mic and you're like, I was just telling everybody how cool this guy is. And now he's lame. But Cody Durden in the octagon is not someone I want to come up against because his wrestling is top tier, and as is Ulanbekov. So I don't think those will cancel each other out. I think that probably neither will want to go for it because Ulanbekov is, while he has 0 knockouts, is happy to stay on the feet and rip his 1-2s at range. He's a little awkward, but it works. And Cody Durden can do damage in his own right. He's got great elbows, which I love from range, where he's able to throw it and be able to really implement a lot of different attacks, including kicks to the body and legs, not as much the head. But he's impressive, and he's got cardio to boot. So he's going to be able to give Ulanbekov that test for as long as he wants to. I think Ulanbekov could probably dance around the outside and be able to dance to a win, pepper him a little bit. But I think that Cody Durden's probably going to push him. And that's why I like the dog in this fight. I think this is a live dog. I think Ulanbekov is not Khabib. Everyone wants to put him as Khabib. He's got the name from that area and everything. But 14-2 feels like a little bit of a fraudulent record. And Cody Durden's on quite the run now. He's won 4 in a row. The names, again, aren't the sexiest of names, but his only 2 losses were Muhammad Makayev and Jimmy Flick, which happens. But, I mean, he's knocked out JP Baez, then he's beaten Carlos Mota, Charles Johnson, and Jake Hadley all by decision his last 3 fights. I think he keeps it rolling. What about you?
I picked Tagir because I have to pick a fight one way or the other. That is part of the program here. But I do see what you're saying about Durden, where I think that he can beat Ulanbekov if he hits him because he's going to hit him hard and defends the takedown. He can potentially dominate on the ground in his game typically, but I don't think that's going to work against Tagir, where Durden is going to want to shoot takedowns, and against a guy like Tagir, I just don't think that's going to work. And I think that's where he could get caught, get a little cocky, and Tagir takes advantage. And that's where I do give Tagir enough of an edge where I would pick. I'm going to pick him, but I don't have a bet on this one. This is another one I'm staying away, just like the heavyweight bout 2 fights ago. I just don't feel a strong inclination one way or the other. I see this going a lot of different ways. I am polar opposite of the fight we previewed 2 fights ago. I'm very, very excited to watch this one and hope that Tagir does not withdraw, and hope that we get to, I mean, we're going to air the video no matter what, but but that the video actually gets some run because of how exciting of a fight this is. So you're going with Durden. I'm going with Tagir. You do not have a bet on this one, correct?
I've got Durden for a half unit at plus 145. To your point, though, I mean, I do think that there is definitely room for a submission from Ulanbekov. Durden loves to go for double legs, get caught in a guillotine. It would not surprise me a bit if Ulanbekov got a guillotine in this fight. If there's a specific way to bet exact guillotine, I would. That's how I think he gets it done. But I'll take Durden just straight up on the money line to be able to outlast him throughout the fight.
All right, Rick is going with Durden as the pick and the play. I am going with Tagir as my pick, but no play from a betting sense. And we are going to head into the next one, which is a light heavyweight bout between Alonzo Minifield and Dustin Jacoby. Stay with us.
And at the official halfway point of our prelims, the 5th prelim, we've got Alonzo Minifield taking on Dustin Jacoby. Both fighters now have had a pretty good run in the UFC. Alonzo Minifield at 7-3-1 in the UFC. Dustin Jacoby at 7-4-1. Jacoby getting back on the winning ways after a split decision loss against Khalil Roundtree, who hell of an impressive win last week against Anthony Smith. Finished him in the first round. And then he lost to Azamat Murzakanov, which happens again, but ended up knocking out Kennedy and Zech. I'm not even gonna finish it. In the first round, you all know who I'm talking about. Everyone who's watching this video knows exactly who I'm talking about. And finished with a right cross in Zechku. And I'm not. No. I said I wouldn't, and I tried again. I'm not doing it. But was able to finish him in his last fight. And that adds one more win to a couple of other impressive wins that he's already had in the UFC, like Mikhail Oleg-Zaysek and Daun Jung. So somehow I can pronounce those 2 names, but not Kennedy's last name. But switching over to Minifield, he's been able to figure it out. He was a little bit slower early on in his career. Granted, he got 2 knockouts in his first 2 fights, finishing Vinicius Moreira and Paul Craig, who it seems like everyone's finished him at this point, sadly. But then he ended up losing to OSP and Devin Clark before making a good run, going 5-1 with 1 draw against Jimmy Crute in his last 6 fights. with three straight finishes as well. So, but where does he get it done? Jacoby, he's starting to get up there in age, but it's that kickboxing background. He fought Alex Pereira in kickboxing. He's fought tons of other veterans in the kickboxing world. And that's where if he's able to keep the fight at range, he's going to have a lot of success. And it's his leg kicks. The leg kicks get him started with every fight. And for Minifield, it's the hooks. Minifield is not a kickboxer, but it's those hooks and that power that really allows and makes opponents really second-guess themselves. And if he's able to touch Dustin Jacoby early, I think that he could end up making Jacoby just second-guess getting in the pocket with him to where we could see a much different fight. But if Jacoby starts steamrolling, we could have a quick finish. What do you think?
I also give Jacoby the edge there. Being 12-2-1 in his last 15, whether it's kickboxing, boxing, or MMA since 2017, I think is awesome. Of course, 1-2 in the last 3 is not always the most ideal thing, but I do feel like Jacoby has been on a run here, and it's either make or break for him because in the sense that he's kind of been that gatekeeper for a while at this light heavyweight division where he's kind of sat there right at 15 or on the edge of that top 15. And you can only sit there in that spot for so long. Where if somebody like Alonzo Minifield puts you out, then I think he's done being the gatekeeper. That's not necessarily knocking Alonzo Minifield, but I think we kind of know what it is with both these guys, their ages, etc. Minifield's defense will be a big question for this one. I think Jacoby should be able to put some calculated damage on him. And to your point, using that kickboxing skill set, really keep him at range, play it smart, because we know that Minifield is so good at putting people's lights out. It's really exciting to watch when he does. I just don't think he's going to be able to land as much as we think against Jacoby, who should be able to really play his own game and go up against someone in Minifield and land some nice strikes on him, who honestly, Alonzo Minifield, I don't see him being as skilled as Jacoby on the feet. So the pick for me, I am going with Dustin Jacoby in this one in a fight of 2 older light heavyweight dudes, kind of trying to propel one or the other up the rankings and then try to make one go of it. But for a betting sense, I'm not entirely sure. For those who don't know, Rick and I don't really convene on what our picks are beforehand. We do it live on the air. So I was going to hear what you had for your betting pick because I don't have my own, but I might side with you if I like what you say.
Yeah, I've got 2 different plays in this fight that I'll get to in a second. And really they all stem from the fact that these guys are going to want to strike. Jacoby's got the kickboxing, but does he get taken down? Minifield's not known. Like everyone thinks of Minifield for the power, for the hooks, for the knockouts, but he's got a sneaky submission game in there. And if he's able to really counter those kicks a little bit with that and get Jacoby guessing, I think that he could end up being able to find his shot and potentially put Jacoby out. But if not, like I said, I think Jacoby could really start to find his groove. And once he finds his groove in that kickboxing, it's hard to get him out of it. The only thing that would be able to get him out of it is just get hit clean with a counter right hook or something from Minifield. But to that point, I've got Jacoby as well. I think Jacoby wins this fight. I think he's able to implement that range, keep the fight at range and on the feet, and slowly beat Minifield, either finish him or potentially by decision. I think he finished him. But so I picked Jacoby, but I'm going to end up betting Minifield for a half unit. I think there's definitely an avenue for Minifield to win, and I don't think that he should nearly be a 2.5 to 1 dog. I don't think that he should be plus 230. I think of this more as a minus 200 fight, plus 160. And so that's a value play in a fight that I think will be more of a toss-up. And so I'm going to throw that for a half unit, but then I'm also going to take the fight not to go the distance at minus 150 for a half unit as well. I think that Jacoby can get to some of those slower starts that Minifield might be able to take advantage of. But I think that we're going to end up getting into one too many car crash exchanges between these 2 Asian guys. And we're going to get one of these guys getting hit harder than he wants to get hit and get put out. So my picks, Minifield plus 230 for a half unit and fight not to go the distance, minus 150 for a half unit. Andy, does that entice you to take a play on this fight?
I probably am not. I probably am not, but that is because I totally agree with you that the odds are a little bit farther apart than I would have anticipated them to be. I just really feel that Dustin Jacoby wins, but I don't feel so strongly that I'm going to throw him into a parlay to cut that minus 245 down. And of course, I'm not going to take that minus 245 straight. No way. So Rick and I are both taking Jacoby to win the fight as our actual pick for the fight. However, Rick is going on that value from a betting sense, taking Minifield for half a unit as well as fight not to go the distance at minus 150 for also half a unit. Coming up next, we have another flyweight fight, this time in the women's division, with King Casey O'Neill taking on Ariana Lipski. Stay tuned.
And rolling on through the prelims, we've got Casey O'Neill at now 9-1, 4-1 in the UFC, coming up against the Queen of Violence, Ariana Lipski, now 16-8, just 5-5 in the UFC, but making her way back in the win column. Won her last two against JJ Aldridge and Melissa Gatto. And Gatto, she was a big underdog in that fight, at plus 190. Won it by split decision. And it was a good fight in that card, but it was good to see her get back to her best because before that, she had lost 3 of her 4 fights, all by finish, and was really struggling back before she joined the UFC. She was KSW's just Queen of Violence, where, that's how she got her nickname. She would destroy, front kicks, aggression, elbows. Just as ruthless as a fighter gets in women's MMA. But then she came in the UFC and was humbled very quickly. Joanne Wood, formerly Joanne Calderwood, if you know her by that name, stifled her in her debut. And then she faced everyone's favorite, Meatball Molly McCann, stifled again on the feet. And so she really had to reinvent herself a little bit. But she can get it done anywhere on the mat, whether it's on the feet or on the mat itself. She's got it, but sometimes it just doesn't bring itself together. But Casey O'Neill, it's wrestling and submission. That is what she's good for, and that's what she knows. She tore ACL back in 2022, but seemingly fully recovered now. Andy, how do you see it? How do you see it playing out in this fight? I think it's a weird one.
Yeah. So to your point about O'Neill's injury, that led to her only really having 2 fights in the last 2 years. One was a win that she got over Roxanne Modafferi, which congrats. It's about as easy as it gets. And then she tore her ACL after that, and then lost in March this year to Jennifer Maia. She is training at Extreme Couture, which I find to be pretty interesting. I think that this really is going to help her step up her striking game. Because to your point, she's phenomenal on the ground. And Extreme Couture is one of the hottest gyms in MMA right now. You've got Francis Ngannou there. You've got Sean Strickland there. You've got a lot of other names there that are electrifying strikers and cardio beasts. Excuse me. With that great ground game as her base and seeing her continue to improve that striking game, I think that O'Neill is going to kind of get back on that right track because she was a prospect that I was really excited about until we've kind of seen her fall to the wayside as a lot of other exciting women's MMA prospects have risen up due to Casey O'Neill kind of not being as relevant. She did fight earlier again in March in that loss, but she took some time off because of that injury. I think that the ACL injury is definitely unfortunate, but she's 26. You're going to come back in full. You're going to come back with a head full of confidence because of her age. I think that she still has a path to kind of get into one of those name brand names in this flyweight women's division. Where for Lipski, her path forward is kind of uncertain. She's rotated through 3 gyms now. She now trains with her husband at King's MMA. She can't really seem to get right, even though she does have those 2 wins this year against Aldrich and Gatto that you touched on. I don't think that she can, or she is in Lipski. I don't think she can do as much off of her back, and O'Neill should easily get her there from what O'Neill's used to. And I do feel that maybe she even pieces her up on the feet and then gets her there, because I do feel like O'Neill, if she has improved in her striking game as much as we think, should be able to either win on either side of her game, whether it's the mat or whether it's on the feet. I mean, if I haven't hinted at already, I like O'Neill to win this fight, and I'm actually going to be filling her out with my parlay here. So using Randy Brown from earlier and adding her in at -200. So O'Neill at -200 on Caesars paired with Randy Brown at -260 gets you +108. I'll be laying that parlay for 1.5 units, Rick. That's my play, and my pick is O'Neill. What do you have?
Fair enough. Yeah, I think that'll be interesting to see what exactly O'Neill's been working on over the past, 9-ish months since that Maia fight. Because in the Maia fight, she really wanted to prove herself in the striking and show those developments, and it lost her the fight. It did.
Yeah.
She's best when it's wrestling and submission, but she wants to continue to evolve her game, and I applaud her for that, because that's how you become a champion. You might lose that fight to Jennifer Maia, but you clearly have the mentality of, I want to be elite in different facets of my game. I need to improve in certain areas to complete myself to be able to be that fighter. And I think that she's going to want to test herself against Lipski in that realm. at least a little bit, at least until she realizes, hey, you know what? I'm not there yet. Let me use my wrestling. But she's got that in the back pocket regardless. And her having that in the back pocket allows her to be able to test herself in the striking without really worrying about losing the fight in this fight in particular. Jennifer Maia, a level above Ariana Lipski. And so I think that O'Neal's probably going to be able to get it done. Maybe on the feet, like you said. And I'm eager to see how she's been able to progress in that regard. But I think that regardless, she'll be able to use her wrestling when she needs it to be able to get the fight on the mat, win the rounds that she needs, and possibly finish Ariana Lipski. So I'm going O'Neal in the fight. I'm not betting a side in this one. I think it's a little too stinky as far as lines go. And so I'm going to stay away and wait for the next fight because we got 14 of them to go. So Andy going with Casey O'Neal. I'm going with Casey O'Neal. He's closing out his parlay with Randy Brown at plus 108 odds for a unit and a half. Next up, we've got Cody Garbrandt versus Brian Boom Keller, and what should be a hell of a fight in the prelims. So we'll see you there.
Coming up next, we have Cody Garbrandt taking on Brian Boom Kelleher in a bantamweight matchup that was set up by, as Dana White called him, fucking UFC lunatic Joe Reeves. Joe Reeves, for those of you who don't know, was the UFC fan who won the matchmaker sweepstakes, where he got to go into the UFC headquarters, hang out with the matchmakers, and give some input. As it turns out, Joe Reeves was so good at matchmaking by Dana White standards that he ended up hiring him on the spot. And this was one of the ones that he set up, at least that Dana White told us about. I haven't heard of any other ones that Joe has set up during his time with the UFC. But hey, congrats to Joe. One of us, now working with the big boys. So we've got no love, Cody Garbrandt, the former champion himself. We've talked about it being a little bit of a change of the guard. Not really a change of the guard here because he's going up against Brian Kelleher, but it is an old head kind of back at it, at least from an old head standpoint. He's got those MMA miles, and the MMA miles have not treated him well, Rick. I think that Garbrandt still has the hand speed. He can still put some damage on his opponents. I think that he will be able to put damage on Kelleher if he chooses to. The chin is completely shot for him. Like, it's gone. It is gone. And I think that's the scarier part because you pair that with his style where he kind of fights with his hands down and how careful he fought Trevin Jones in his last time out. Like, I thought he lost that third round against Trevin Jones in that fight because he was just being way too calm and way too reserved, trying to he was like, oh, I won the first 2 rounds. Oh my God, I might actually get a win. He did. You can't really do that against Brian Kelleher. And I think that's what makes this one so exciting. And what makes me think that we have a really good one on our hands here with Joe Reeves setting the matches. So Rick, what do you see with this one?
Yeah, I think that it'll be interesting because that Trevin Jones fight, as you mentioned, I mean, he landed less than 30 strikes and we went to a decision. And there was no ground control. Like, that fight was on the feet, and he landed 2 strikes a minute against Trevin Jones. I mean, it was as bad of a comeback. I mean, he was out for about 15 months before that fight, too. So people were eager to see him. I mean, he's got a big draw. He's a big name. He talks a lot, too. Obviously, he's got all the knockouts on his resume. But you didn't really see much. I mean, to your point, the speed was still there, but he's a boxer. That is what he is. That is what he is. Like, we know what he is. He's not developing other skills. He doesn't kick at all. He's not going to take you down. He's not going to submit you. He's got 0 submissions to his name. He's only won 3 decisions, with that Trevin Giles being one of them. But what's going to make this fight interesting is that Kelleher's always down to get into one of those tussles. He's going to force it out of you. And so no matter what, he's going to bring it out of Cody Garbrandt. Either we're going to see the Cody Garbrandt of old where he knocks a guy out and he knocks Kelleher out because Kelleher can get wobbled. He's gotten wobbled plenty of times, too often. So either we're going to see Kelleher get wobbled and finished, or we're going to see Kelleher take it to Garbrandt and really put a nail in that coffin that is his UFC career. But what we've seen out of Kelleher is when he does get wobbled, he's proven over and over that he's got that dog in him. And he's going to keep going forward, and he's got that wrestling in his back pocket. His scrambling and his offensive takedowns are fantastic. His defensive takedowns suck dick. Well, he doesn't have to use them here. Doesn't have to worry about them.
100%.
So I think that we're going to see a Kelleher that's motivated, despite being 37 years old, and that is going to want to take the fight to Garbrandt and have more weapons than Garbrandt. The only issue is can he get there before that straight from Garbrandt lands? Because Garbrandt's got good power and good speed. So It's an interesting fight. I think the odds are interesting as well, just because these guys are so small. There's not much. The odds are minus 150 for it not to go the distance, which is surprising given Cody Garbrandt's history, because despite that Trevin Jones decision, the fights before go first round knockout decision, second round knockout, first round knockout, first round knockout, second round knockout, decision, first round knockout, first round knockout, first round knockout. In this division, you don't see that. And with his chin being gone, I think that we see one of the two. I think that he knows he's on his last legs. He knows this type of fighter that he is, an entertaining fighter. He's going to want to fall on his sword here. And if not, Brian Keller is going to make him fall on his sword. So I'm going to go Keller in this fight. I'm going to go the underdog. I think he's got more ways to win it. He was plus 185 last night. He's already down to plus 165. So I'm going to have to lock him in at plus 165 apprehensively. But I'm also going to take the fight not to go the distance at minus 150 as well. I think that we get a finish in this one pretty confidently. And so I've got a unit on both of those. Andy, what about you?
I'm with you on the fight not to go the distance. This is one of those that I touched on earlier where it's awkward if you want to take Cody Garbrandt because you're not trying to lay minus 190 on the guy, or I guess he's down a little bit more than that now, as you said, that the odds have kind of went a bit in Keller's favor here. But I love the fight not to go to distance because I'm with you. I don't necessarily think Cody Garbrandt's going to try to fall on his sword, though, is where I'm going to disagree. I just think that Brian Kelleher is going to bring so much chaos his way that he's going to have no choice but to actually bring the weapons out. He's not going to really be able to play it safe like he did with Trevin Jones. And that's what's exciting about this one. I mean, Kelleher's coming off of a neck injury here. Like, he's fully healed up now, but like there's stuff when you get to that age, there's going to be other lingering stuff with this guy as there is with Garbrandt, because we've seen it with Garbrandt. So I can't wait to – or go ahead.
No, I was going to say, the last point I wanted to make is the people that Kelleher has struggled with in his 8-7 UFC career have been elite wrestlers or BJJ artists, not Cody Garbrandt. I mean, his losses got submitted by Nurmagomedov, submitted by Mario Bautista, lost to Ricky Simone, lost to a wrestler in Cody Stamann. Those are his losses, not the type of fighter that Garbrandt is. So, sorry. My last point is sort of hammering home how confident we are in Keller.
Yeah, so I'll be taking Kelleher as my pick to win the fight. My play is fight not to go the distance. Rick is going with Kelleher to win the fight and is also putting him for half a unit, correct? To
full unit. Full unit to win the fight.
Full unit.
Yeah.
Come on. Do it for Joe Reeves. And then we
Bam.
both have fight not to go the distance at minus 150. Coming up next, we have Irene Aldana taking on Carol Rosa in the second to last fight of the prelims at women's bantamweight. So keep it locked in with us as we continue to go along with UFC 296.
Coming up with our co-prelim main event, as I like to call them, the second to last fight of the prelims, we've got Irene Aldana versus Carol Rosa in a top 10 bout in the women's bantamweight division, if I could speak. Carol Rosa being 9, Irene Aldana coming off the championship defeat to Amanda Nunes in I don't want to say embarrassing fashion, but it was as dominant gets for Amanda Nunes. Yeah, and you could tell that she was a fish out of water in that fight. She didn't belong in the same octagon as an aging Amanda Nunes, which says enough. And I think that sort of shows the bantamweight division and where we're at. But this fight could be interesting. I think stylistically, there's some different matchups within the matchup that make this fight at least intriguing. Aldana likes to keep it range. Really, that boxing is what's going to get it done for her. She's got a jab that she's going to throw out there consistently and should be able to land against a much smaller Rosa. And so if she can start to get that jab going, keep the range, she's good. She's extremely skilled. We all know just how skilled she is. The issue is you never see it come together. And that's why everyone was excited to see her test Amanda Nunes maybe, if she's able to really be able to complete those, complete all of her skills, be able to mesh them together, especially after knocking out Yana Santos, knocking out Macy Chiasson, but it didn't come together. And we were reminded just how bad it can look when it really starts to look bad. And really where she struggled throughout her entire UFC career is in the clinch. She can get out-muscled, out-clinched along the fence. And I'll be damned if that isn't exactly where Carol Rosa goes in every single one of her fights. Carol Rosa is not a fun fighter. Let's be honest. She's got 4 knockouts, 2 submissions to her name, 11 decision wins. She's 6-2 in the UFC. but not really many good wins. Both of her losses to Sarah McMahon and Norma Dumont. Her best win is Jocelyn Edwards, maybe a split decision against Yana Santos. Like, not great, Jim.
And all wins are by decision.
Yeah, and so what she's going to do is she's going to want to march her opponent down, continue on the front foot, and then get the fight along the fence, and then be able to throw underhooks and get her underhooks in, be able to try and take you down. But if not, just wear on you. And it might work. It just might work in this fight because I don't believe Aldana is dangerous enough to separate and to be able to stop it from happening. But Andy, what do you think about this fight? What do you think about the state of the women's bantamweight division?
Well, I think, I said I was going to ease into ripping this division, but this division was literally created for Amanda Nunes. So I think that the state of it is in horrible shape right now, and this is a result of it. Like, we have Aldana, who is the third best bantamweight fighter right now in this division, taking on Carol Rosa, and I don't think that the odds should be this far apart, to be honest with you. Like, she has the height advantage, but that reach advantage is not as far apart as you would think for someone who's 4 inches taller. I do think that Carol Rosa, it's going to be interesting. I want to see her use that Muay Thai stance and get Aldana in the clinch because I want to see what happens. I want to see if she can get her in the clinch, get her down, and see if she can sit on her, kind of like how Amanda Nunes did. Aldana is going to let Rosa have her chance to do that because she likes to force her opponent to be the aggressor because she's not great moving forward. And I just don't understand how she's minus 210, besides that people recognize the name and they were like, oh, yeah, she fought Amanda Nunes. But then you look at the rest of the division. So you've got Caitlin Vieira. You've got Juliana Pena, who has not fought since losing to Amanda Nunes. I don't know what she's waiting on. You've got Raquel Pennington, who's taking on Mayra Bueno Silva in the bantamweight title fight next month. I don't know how people are excited for these because, like, you got Macy Chiasson at 10. Misha Tate should move up, so, like, that'll be exciting to see. But, like, Jocelyn Edwards doesn't really get me that excited. Like, you said that was her best win, whatever. I just don't know how they're going to be able to continue this division without Amanda Nunes unless they really make an active effort to find girls who are at this weight. And it's difficult because all the talent is at 115 and 125 for the females. It is not at 135, and that's why I'm not very excited for this fight. And I forgot to make a pick for this one. I don't have a bet to answer your question, but if I'm going to go pick, I'm going to go with the dog here. I'm going to go with Rosa because I hate when people just sit back and wait for them to come to them with like Aldana's going to do, as well as I want to see Rosa work that Muay Thai stance. And I don't really care if I get this one wrong because this is probably, I said that heavyweight fight was my least favorite fight. This one's probably tied for it. And it's a shame they put it this high because it's because they got to figure out a way to get hype around this. So may as well put it as the main prelim event, whatever you called it.
Yeah, I mean, if it's a top 10 fight in any division, they're going to want to give it at least some publicity because they need to be able to market this division now because, you pointed it all out. I mean, this division's a mess. They don't know what to do with it, and they don't want to limit it to 2 women's divisions. And I think they're hoping they keep recruiting new females to the division for 135. The issue is you're getting a lot. They're forcing it. You're getting a lot of half-baked prospects that aren't complete yet, so that they might have to develop. Chelsea Chandler is ranked in this division. And there is a meme of her fighting Norma Dumont last time and literally just sprinting in the opposite direction. And this is one of our ranked fighters, ladies and gentlemen. This is not a regional circuit. This is the UFC, and we've got a fighter that's just sprinting in the opposite direction. But anyways, I've got Rosa as well. I think that the 2 areas that she's best with, Aldana struggles with, and that alone makes this fight a lot closer than plus 185, minus 220. So I'm going to go Rosa in this fight. I'm not confident. I will bet it, though, for a half unit, just because I do think there's some value there. I don't want to put too much risk on it, but I think Rosa can get it done. But again, this is the fight where you go and pick up the wings or the popcorn, get the pizza, and do whatever you need to do. Because this fight is it shouldn't be exciting. For it to go the distance is minus 300. So you've got time to go get that pizza and get back. Don't worry. But with our prelim main event, we have a far, far more exciting fight. Bryce Mitchell, on short notice, is taking on one of our good friends in the featherweight division, Josh Emmett. And we will see you there to cover that fight. Thanks for tuning in again to another episode of the Pilsners and Prelims Podcast out of Happy Hour Sports. Make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the message or enjoyed the podcast. And be sure to tune in to our future videos as we break down each and every UFC card each week. Looking forward to seeing you then, and thanks again for the support. Appreciate it.
And wrapping up the prelims here, we get into some of the most exciting fights on the card and the reason why myself and others are calling this one of the best cards of the year, which is awesome that we get to end the year on this one. We've got Josh Emmett at around plus 170 to plus 180 now, which is insane to think about. And Bryce Mitchell's at minus 225. Now, Bryce opened at around minus 130 on Caesars, Rick, and he has now moved all the way to minus 225. This fight was announced last week, and he's already almost moved 100 points of juice, which is insane for a short notice guy, the guy who's short notice to step in. I think a lot of that has to do with the Emmett piece here. So Emmett is at 38 years of age now, and at 145 pounds, Mitchell is holding that huge age advantage over him at 29. I touched on earlier, 38 is kind of that magic number where we see a lot of those fighters deteriorate in terms of their durability in the octagon. Mitchell's not really going to challenge that necessarily. He's not going to be one that knocks him out. In fact, Mitchell has no knockouts to his name in his professional MMA career. So I know for a fact he's not going to be knocking out Josh Emmett. The other thing that I think has impacted this line is the clash of styles. So what Emmett was preparing for was an orthodox kickboxer. He's now going up against a southpaw wrestler, which is such a dramatic change of styles to have to prepare for in a 10-day span once the fight was announced. So for me, I think what's the question is going to be on like which way this fight goes. Emmett's a great defensive wrestler. He does not take damage well. Can Mitchell figure it out and get him down, maybe get him in the ground and pound and get that first knockout, or can he choke him out? Mitchell's got 52 minutes of control time during his time with the UFC, and he's second all time in featherweight in time on top in 47 minutes. I almost just grazed over that. I wanted to make sure I emphasized 47 minutes. Emmett, on the other hand, leads the featherweight division all time with 11 knockdowns. So we do have two kind of record holders in their respective rights. Mitchell's quick, unorthodox in his approach, and Emmett only really has 10 days to get ready for this weird style. I think we missed out on the opportunity to just take Mitchell straight. Like we're recording on Tuesday night this week. It's too late for us to take Mitchell straight when he opened up at minus 130. But I really don't want to take Emmett straight either.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you painted the picture really well for this fight. There's a clash of styles. Mitchell's a wrestler. Emmett's more of a striker, power striker at that. And Mitchell taking it on short notice. I think the defensive wrestling is going to be huge for Emmett. Emmett doesn't really take damage well at this point in his career. I mean, Calvin Kattar, Yair Rodriguez, Ilia Topuria all really damaged him up, and that eye really gets blown up nowadays as soon as he starts taking damage. But to your point, Mitchell really probably won't be the person to do that unless he's doing some ground and pound after he gets a takedown. But in a 3-round fight, I worry about Mitchell being able to win rounds with just takedowns. And Emmett's, I mean, like you said, Emmett has elite wrestling defense. Maybe we missed out on Mitchell minus 130. Maybe. I'm happy to take Emmett at plus 200 or close to, because I've got it at plus 195 right now. And so at nearly 2-to-1 odds, I'll take the guy who's had a full camp, that already has great defensive wrestling, and is going up against a guy who on the feet isn't great. There's obviously always going to be the caveat that Emmett gets taken down, held there by Mitchell, or submitted by Mitchell, but it really hasn't happened in Emmett's career. So I like Emmett in this fight, especially a 2-to-1 underdog line against a guy on short notice. But what was the angle that you ended up liking on this fight that you ended up playing?
So I think if Josh Emmett wins, he's not going to be knocking Bryce Mitchell out. I think he might be able to knock him down, but I don't think that he's going to be able to put his lights out. I would rather side with his cardio here, because I do think that from what I've seen with Mitchell, he got gassed out towards like about halfway through that Topuria fight. And he also was not overly impressive in his last time out against Dan Ige. The only impressive thing he did was how much he yelled and how much he showed his Bible to all of us. So I think if Bryce wins, he ends up pulling it off inside the distance, where he does kind of find a way to get Emmett down and test that defensive wrestling. Bryce did throw a little bit against Topuria. It was nothing really to be proud about, but he did throw a little bit. I don't think that him throwing a little bit does him any favors against Josh Emmett, where I think it would rather open him up a bit more to get absolutely clocked by the knockdown artist himself. But I do like his chances to get him down to the ground and test that defensive wrestling, where I don't necessarily want to lock myself in on submission because of how bad Emmett's chin is. If he can get him down and like get him in a secure spot, he could go into a ground and pound. So I like Bryce to win inside the distance here at minus 135. I'm going to go with that play for a unit, and I'm going to pick Bryce to win the fight. Now, where I'm going to get some value here is I'm going to go with Josh Emmett by decision at plus 500 for half a unit. And that's where I think that's where I think the value is on this one. So half a unit at plus 500, that's a 2.5 unit win if Emmett's able to pull it off. And that inside the distance for Bryce on Bet Online, that is in that whole fight goes to decision, the bet pushes market. So I like when a book can offer you that, because if you can get that inside the distance, but the fight pushes when it goes to decision, and pair it with a decision bet on either with him or on the other side, I think that's not always a bad idea. So again, going with Emmett to get the decision for half unit plus 500, Bryce to win inside the distance at minus 135 for a full unit. That bet pushes if it goes to decision. Rick is on the opposite side of me. He's going with Emmett to get the win. Rick, any parting thoughts before we head into the main card here?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think this fight could go to decision as well. I think it does go to decision. I think that Bryce Mitchell is going to be able to use that wrestling to be able to get himself out of some trouble. And they might win him a round or two. But I like Emmett to win the fight. I think the damage that he's going to be able to do compared to the wrestling is going to outscore Mitchell. And it very well could end up being on the feet for the majority of this fight as well. Or at least in the clinch where Bryce is trying to take him down and eating some little rabbit punches and such. But I like Emmett to win the fight. I've got him straight up. I'll play it at plus 195. That's what I'm seeing now for a half unit. And then I was just thinking that same thing right before you said it about Emmett by decision at plus 500. And I've got a quarter unit on that because I'm not as confident in that. But I like this fight to probably go to decision. It's going to be a long – they're going to wear each other out. And Bryce has fought to so many decision wins across his career. I mean, in his time in the UFC and right before the UFC when he faced Chepe Mariscal, who's now in the UFC, it goes decision, decision, submission, decision, decision, submission, decision, 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 submission, decision. Now, by MMA math, we should have another decision. So let's hit on Josh Emmett to win by decision. Let's give you a 2.5 unit win there. Give me what will end up being, I guess, a 2.25 unit cash there. But who are you on officially to win the fight? Were you on Bryce to win the fight?
I got Bryce. You
picked Bryce. Yeah, so we're split on the picks. You're on Bryce. Wrestling. Yeah, you're on Bryce. I'm on Emmett. But both of us would love an Emmett by decision win. So that is it for the prelims. Next up, we've got the main card, and that main card starts off with everyone's favorite cuck, Ian Machado Gary, taking on Vicente Luque. We will see you there, everyone.
With our first fight on the UFC 296 pay-per-view, we have Vicente Luque taking on Ian, the future Machado Gary, at the welterweight division of 175 pounds. Now, if you haven't heard about it, just search Ian Gary Wag, search Ian Gary Cuckold. You can search Ian Gary Wife. You can search whatever you want. But there's been a lot of drama circulating MMA Twitter, MMA media, anything UFC and MMA about Ian Gary. And there's a lot of just a lot of hate to say, as he put it on his Instagram yesterday, surrounding him from fans as they found out what has been going on with him and his family life and all that. It's a lot of noise, and he's not handling it well, I would say. He shut off his comments on Instagram. He just turned them back on yesterday. But I would say that for how much he has not been handling it well and continues to just lean into it, it's going to be amplified come the press conference this week. And I cannot wait to watch it. That will be one that I pop some popcorn for and watch. And it will be an instant classic because not only are we going to have Ian Gary out there, we're also going to have Colby out there. And we're also going to have Patty the Batty out there. There's a lot of names that are going to be on stage. And it's going to be quite entertaining to watch. Now, I think Gary has looked absolutely dominant his last two times out, putting the drama behind us here against D-Rod and Magny. That judo background paired with his shoot boxing camp that he has now been that's been his home base down in Brazil with them. But he has bounced around a bit where he was at Kill Cliff before Shoot, and then Shoot's kind of home base, but he does have a nomad approach where he has gone and trained at tons of different gyms. And that's what has also garnered a lot of hate towards him, because other fighters are annoyed with it, don't feel that it's right, because a lot of them believe that their camp is home. Those guys they train with, that is their second family. And the other piece is that he's apparently caused a stir a lot of these gyms. And we've heard Leon Edwards talk about it, where Leon claimed this week that he hit him with the headshot dead head kick that he landed against Usman. And that put Gary's lights out apparently in training. Like, there's a lot of just negative stuff swirling around him, where I want to almost just pass it off to you to talk about the styles, because I could go on and waste our entire 5 minutes talking about the drama. And I think that's going to weigh on him, as it did similar to Paddy Pimblett in his fight last year against Jared Gordon, where there was tons of drama with Paddy. It weighed down on him. Any man, unless he has the mental fortitude of, of God himself, I don't know how he's going to be able to handle all that pressure coming in.
Yeah, I mean, he's got all the hype behind him and more. All the hype that Paddy had last year, he's got now on his shoulders. Paddy is an afterthought almost in this card, which is wild to say, because he's fighting Tony Ferguson. I mean, as big a name as it gets in MMA. But with all the headlines recently, like you said, and all the hype behind Ian Gary, I mean, he's 13-0. He's 6-0 in the UFC. And with each fight, they have eased him into the UFC stylistically to try and build up that profile, which they might regret a little bit now looking back at it. But they have eased him in with some favorable matchups. And then the last 3 fights have all been guys that are tailor-made for Gary to have success. With Kenan Song, not the most durable guy. Will give you a decent test, but not the most. Daniel Rodriguez, good striker, not the best, but still looks good, and is still a very good fighter. D-Rod is a very good fighter. And then Neil Magny in his last fight. It's just the cornerstone guy for win and you're ranked, and that's where we're at right now with Ian Gary. But when it comes down to each of these guys, they've got so many different elements to their game. Both of these guys are so insanely talented, and that's what you get when you're at the top 10 of such a deep division like welterweight. Everyone is at least skilled in every facet, whether it be wrestling, grappling, striking, clinch work. They're at least capable in each area. Whether or not they're elite's a different story. Now, Gary came in with very, very good wrestling, ground and pound, and then obviously very, very good striking, especially at range. Luque has been able to get it done on the feet, on the mat, with 19 of his 22 wins coming by finish. Those basically split down the middle between knockouts and submissions as well. This is a big step up for Gary. Like, Vicente Luque is definitely on the downward swing in the UFC, but not really that hard. I mean, his last 7 fights, he won the first 4, beating Nico Price, knocked out Randy Brown, knocked out Tyron Woodley and Michael Chiesa, which Tyron Woodley on his later legs, same with Michael Chiesa, ended up losing to Bilal Muhammad and Jeff Neal. That Jeff Neal win, if y'all remember it, Jeff Neal just pummeled him into submission. I mean, he couldn't take any more damage in that fight, and Jeff Neal just had the gas tank to go for days. But then he came back after a long time off, a year off, and dominated RDA, a legend of the game. Older, but still doing well. And we might go a minute over here to the fans that are watching on YouTube, but also on Spotify or Apple Music, wherever you get your podcasts. But he looked really good in that fight, and I really applaud him for taking all that time off after the damage, because we saw that he wasn't taking it as well. He had some concussion issues. He said, hey, let me reset. Let me take care of my body. I'm only 32, and I've got some decent tread on the tires. But both of these guys at their heart are offensive guys, and their defense is questionable. What I think we're going to get in this fight is a fired-up Ian Gary that could fall into some traps from Vicente Luque. And the reason that I'm not picking a side is because I'm going fight not to go the distance. I think this is a fight tailor-made for a finish, whether you're going the out-of-the-octagon angle with Ian Gary and all the hype behind him and distractions, or affecting his mentality and whether or not he wants to be more aggressive and prove people wrong. Whatever it is, you're getting 2 guys that are offensively minded and have plenty of defensive holes to where either person can get finished. I think fight not to go the distance at -150 is my play of the night, and one of my favorite cards, or one of my favorite bets of the past number of cards that we've had. And so I've got that for 3 units at -150 odds. So
the ever so rare 3-unit play from Rick. That's awesome. I did not realize you're getting a 3-unit one on this one. That's awesome. I also was going with fight not to go the distance. I'm going with 1 unit here. I agree with everything you said. I think that there is so much around this, and I want to almost touch on like Vicente Luque at one point was that hot up-and-coming prospect. Now, he was not tailor-made by the UFC to put on this pedestal where they've continued to amplify him. He did not have as smart of a marketing team around him where Ian Gary's been filming his every move like it's the Last Dance documentary, even though the kid is only 26, 27.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's 26. And he's got people filming his every move and putting it on Instagram. And he is making a documentary apparently. So Vicente Luque once, I'm starting to ramble. Vicente Luque once was that guy in this division where he was one of the big up-and-comers. He had that slip against Stephen Thompson. It happens. And then went on that 4-fight win streak and then had those last 2. I am a little worried about like Luque's time off, but I do, and because he had like a brain bleed thing he was dealing with. That stuff worries me a bit, but if he wasn't good, the UFC would not let him fight because a brain bleed, that's serious stuff. The phenomenal Muay Thai is what I'm excited to see. 13 finishes inside the UFC for Luque. I agree with you, Rick. I think it's going to be a lights out kind of night. Who do you pick to win the fight, though? Because we have to at least give a pick. I'm going to go with Gary, even though I don't want to. I think that he is going to ultimately win the fight. It will be awesome for continuing to propel him into MMA heights from a media standpoint and building that villain story up. But I do have him as the pick, even though we both say fight not to go the distance.
Yeah, I mean, I pick Gary too. I think that range and some of the damage that he might be able to inflict on an aging Luque is going to do enough for him. I do think, like, contrarily to your point earlier about the comments, I think that turning the comments off was possibly a good idea for him to say, hey, you know what? We've got 2 weeks until camp. Let's focus in. I don't need all this side stuff. Let me get in with my camp and make sure that I'm fully prepared for this fight. And as we get into the week of, then we can start to do some of the marketing and promotional stuff that you have to do anyways. So I think that it was probably smart, and I'm sure he had people in his ear telling him to do that. And I think that he's able to get the fight done and continue to build up that brand, like you said. But I wouldn't be shocked at all if Vicente Luque slept him on the way in. So it should be an incredible fight.
Yeah. My last thing, and I hope it wasn't Photoshop because I'll sound like a dumbass, but Terrence McKinney did tweet out a picture of a giant cold sore on Ian Gary's lip. And I hate that. It happens to me sometimes too, right? But it is I think he definitely is stressed out because that is a big thing that happens to you when you're stressed. So I think there is a lot on his shoulders here, to my point, where Luque is the value play, where if you're going to take a side from a betting standpoint, you want to take one side or the other, take Luque. Plus 300, that is awesome, awesome, awesome value. Actually, fuck it. I'm going Luque as well as a play for half a unit. But I am picking Gary to win the fight. Rick and I both have fight not to go the distance. He's got it for 3 units. It is his play of the year because we only have a couple weeks left of the year. Keep it locked in with us as we go on to Paddy the Batty taking on Tony Ferguson. Coming up next, we have the man from Liverpool himself, Paddy the Batty, taking on Tony Ferguson. And Rick, this one opened up very, very, very tall for Paddy the Batty. He was anywhere from minus 380 to minus 400, depending on where you shop for your lines. And slowly but surely, it was bet in favor of Tony. Sent Paddy as far down as minus 245 on Tuesday of last week, which I would have loved to see. I just was not paying attention, truthfully, around that time. I was still recovering from our Green Bay trip. Now Paddy is back to around that minus 300 range, with Tony not as exciting of a dog as he once was if you want to side with Tony, but he's still around plus 230, so you're doubling your money if he ends up pulling off an incredible upset here. Paddy won a very questionable fight against Jared Gordon last time out. I think that you can clip Paddy, you can hit him, you can even wobble him maybe, but he is going to hit you back hard, if not twice as hard. He's got some absolute firecrackers in his hands. And he's also a legit grappler, where spectacular and dangerous on the ground. I mean, he submitted Jordan Levitt, and for what it's worth, I know Jordan Levitt's stock might not be as high right now after that Chase Hooper fight, but I still respect him as one of the best in the division on the ground, and he submitted. Tony Ferguson, on the other hand, he's been training with Navy SEAL David Goggins for this fight, which is a fascinating character to be training with. He's in absolutely insane shape heading into this bout. And Rick, you and I have joked about it ever since the fight happened, ever since the odds released for this fight. We had been texting saying, I'm going to take Tony. I'm going to take Tony. I'm going to take Tony. With these odds, I'm not taking Tony. I think the insane shape piece is really interesting. And I just think it's an older fighter overcompensating for what was once greatness and is now, unfortunately, very, very much sadness. I thought he looked great against Mike Chandler, then he got knocked out. I thought he should have steamrolled Nate Diaz, then he got beat. Tony should not be fighting mixed martial arts anymore, in my opinion. But I'm kind of giving the prelude to what you're going to dive into with a much more actual MMA approach. I'm interested to hear your thoughts.
A little bit. I mean, Tony feels like one of those guys that like needs to be saved by his corner. Like he doesn't know when is good for him to stop, and it feels like he also knows how to market himself. Like he's always been a little bit of an odd duck. Has some funny quips in press conferences. I'm sure he'll have some fun ones in this one. But he knows how to market himself, and I feel like that's sort of where that conditioning training piece is coming from. Like everyone's sort of been like, oh well, Tony maybe, and that's how it sort of felt for like 5 of the last 6 losses for Tony. Where every fight you're like, well, you never know with Tony, like he could be able to do. But the issue is that speed and that athleticism has waned way too far, and he was relying on that. I mean, that's what made him good. That's what made him so unique and so weird was he could get in and out and hit these weird angles, look away from you and dance, do all these little things to catch you off or get you not completely focused on the fight to where he'd be able to take advantage of it. And against a guy like Patty, I don't think that you could really do that. I think Patty's going to be able to wrestle him. And Tony has struggled with wrestlers in the past. In particular, getting up once he's taken down. And Patty's a guy that sometimes he will go for submission over position and be able to lose the position. But I don't think that Patty's going to get submitted by Tony. Tony definitely could. He's got 9-0 record, and we all know how slippery he can be on the mat when it comes to submissions and grabbing them. But I don't know, man. I don't see Patty getting hit clean because of his bad striking defense. Since Tony Ferguson is such an unorthodox striker, it's not the simple like leaves his chin up, gets hit with the left straight. It would be some sort of like up elbow as Patty's trying to get overzealous on an entry where he like up elbows from the back, something like that would end up catching Patty. But there's too many avenues to where I see Patty winning, which really upsets me to say. And because of that, I've got no bet on this fight. But
okay, no, that's fair.
Yeah, I think Patty wins. But what else do you have on this fight as well?
I'm with you in the sense, like, I used to be a big Patty fan, and I was pulling for him in every sense. And then when he came at my boy Ariel Helwani, and the wise words of Ariel, when you come at the king, you best not miss. And Patty missed pretty wide left with the stupid shit that he said about Ariel. But this is not going to be one where, to your point, like Patty's got poor striking defense. He leaves that chin up. That chin is ready to be knocked when you leave it up. There is an avenue where it happens for Tony. It's just so slim. I don't think that Tony has any chance to be able to find that slim path to get him. And like that, Patty's chin was going to be fine in this instance because Tony's so old. Like this is just a gift from the UFC to a guy they're continuing to try to groom and move up the ranks and continue to move his storyline. We've got 2 of those right here with Ian Gary. They're trying to with Vicente Luque. Vicente Luque, a much harder foe than Tony Ferguson. Very, very much more difficult. That's why I put some money on him. But both of these are kind of storyline movers. I think this is a basic bet. It could be a trap line. I don't care. I'm going with Patty to win inside the distance, -130. And as his odds continue to climb, this could also move up a bit. His odds have started to move like a stock price fluctuation, in my opinion. And I think that they're going to slowly move back up. And the inside the distance will also move. So Patty's either going to submit him or clock him. And it's unfortunate, but it quite literally is more of a Tony Ferguson fade than anything here. And I hate to see it, but I mean, we've seen it with guys like BJ Penn. We've seen it with other older guys. Like you have to get this old guy to wake up and be like, dude, it's time to take care of my life. And it's a shame the UFC is still letting him fight. And that's the point I'm at with this one, where I feel like it's shameful that the UFC is still letting him fight because it's ugly when Tony Ferguson gets out there. Wish him all the best, though. Excited to see him at the press conference. He is going to be hilarious in that shit show of an environment that press conference is going to be. And you will see me fade Patty Pimblett soon, but this is not the time. Patty inside the distance, -130 for a unit. You are picking Patty to win the fight, correct?
Yeah, picking Patty to win the fight. No bet for me, though. If anything, I lean towards fight not to go the distance, -160. A little bit more juicy than Patty inside the distance, but it's safe if Tony gets the freak knockout that I will actively cheer for. So I might end up going that way. I'll tweet it out if I do, at RickHH Sports. Again, both of us going with Patty Pimblett. Andy locking up Patty Pimblett inside the distance, -130 for full unit, right?
Yeah, for one full unit. And I think one last thing with these 2 fights before we move on.
Mm-hmm.
If you have any free play on your book, free bets sitting around, I feel like Luque or Tony are good for that, just for fun, because you're not losing anything out of it. But yeah, I'm going with Paddy inside the distance. We're both going with the man from Liverpool himself, walking out with that beautiful red Liverpool flag. We will be going on next to a welterweight bout at 170 featuring Shavkat Rakhmonov taking on Stephen Wonderboy Thompson.
Coming up with our fifth to final fight of the night, we've got Shavkat Rakhmonov going right up the division. Now 17-0, undefeated, 5-0 in the UFC, facing longtime UFC veteran and fellow South Carolinian Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. Wonderboy, now a veteran in his career, famous for his kickboxing. Everyone knows it. Turns 41 in February, so getting up there in years, 11, almost 12 years older than Shavkat Rakhmonov. If my math is right there. And
11 years.
11 years, yeah. And so it's going to come down to whether or not he can keep it on the feet or whether or not Shavkat's going to be able to take him down. And while it is not that simple as far as Shavkat's skills, that is where he is elite. And that's where the master of sport in combat sambo and the master of sport in MMA is at his best, is when he's able to implement that takedown. And his striking continues to be more refined. He's getting more technical there, but the power has always been a problem for his opponents. And if he's able to land it, your lights very well might get shut out. So should be an interesting fight. Shavkat is heavily favored, as he should be. But Andy, Ben, would love to hear y'all's thoughts. Andy, what do you got?
Yeah, I think it's a bit sad for Wonderboy here because he was supposed to fight Michel Pereira back in July on that super card, the one for the BMF belt, where all those main event cards were all those main event fights were electric. And then Pereira had that egregious weight miss. And I just feel bad because Wonderboy's 40, right? He doesn't have a ton of opportunities to have fights like this until it was bound for something like this to happen where such an electrifying prospect like Shavkat was going to come in and just light him up. And unfortunately, that's kind of where we're at, where when a fight goes to the ground, Wonderboy looks useless. When it stays on the feet, he is going to look impressive and hold his own. Like we saw him really piece up and make Kevin Holland have to retire, which was an awesome way to end. I think that was one of the last cards last year. That was a really fun fight, but that's just not one of these, man. Like you can't teach an old dog new tricks. It's not going to be one for him that he's just magically going to be good on the ground. And that's where Shavkat's probably going to butter him up. Ben, I can tell by your nickname on the StreamYard that you probably have the same opinion as me on this one.
Yeah. I mean, I obviously the nickname Shavkat's the future of the division, period. Right. I mean, even if he loses the fight, which he won't, he's still the future of the division. I think at least for the next couple of years, he's still the guy to watch, and he's been the guy to watch for the last couple of years. So it's kind of an interesting position to be in. He's hands down the more complete fighter than just about anybody in the division, right? Sick, hurt, or otherwise. And for what he probably lacks in a little bit in polish, he makes up for with his heart, makes up for with his work ethic. His cardio's getting better. And I guess I can't say that for sure because the guy doesn't go out of round two. I mean, he's been out of round two a couple of times and, he just whoops everyone's ass, pronto. So I feel like he's kind of got this Sarukian kind of vibe as well. Obviously, in the welterweight division, but they've got these veteran badasses, on the rankings above them, but they both seem to progress exponentially compared to every other fighter in the division, every single fight. Right. And they're already afraid of nobody. So it's one of those things where I feel like, just like Sarukian, he's the future despite there being a congested top five, right, in the respective divisions. I also think if you're anyone other than Kevin Holland, a kick or two from Wonderboy and it can be lights out. You know what I mean? So from Kevin Holland, I don't even know how the guy is still alive, to be honest, let alone standing in the fight. Because he took at least, I think I counted at least 25 shots to the head in one round. It was unreal, right? So unless you're, Kevin Holland, you probably get lights out one or two kicks from Wonderboy. But you're right, he's 40, 41. And, Shavkat showed he could take some heavy hits, right? His first round with Jeff Neal in UFC 285-ish was probably one of the more fun rounds of MMA I think I've watched in the last year or two. I mean, it was just a fun fight. And Jeff Neal's got some crisp boxing, right? To say that, I get it, kickboxer, he's fighting here, on this card, but in that fight, he showed he could take a hit to the chin, right? He showed he could take a hit to the temple, and he still, stood up. He was smiling after a bunch of them. So I think it's pretty interesting to be able to see that kind of thing, and he really does egg the guys on. Obviously, the odds makers like Shavkat here. The lines are pretty absurd. But I don't know that my play particularly, factors as heavily on that. So I originally took him as part of a 4-fight parlay. I had winners in this order: Volkanovski, which was negative 195 against Topuria. Then I had Strickland negative 150 against Duplessis. I had Rachmanov negative 550 is when I locked it in, which I'm glad I locked it earlier. But I've also made another bet here, and then I had Arman Sarukian, which already, that leg already paid off for me at negative 275 against Darush. So I've replaced that play with another parlay, which I think makes probably just as much sense. And it's not going to be groundbreaking because it's all, obvious favorites here. But I've taken Shavkat at negative 650, Sean O'Malley at negative 220 in his main event.
I love that
card. Volkanovski at negative 185, and then Strickland at negative 150 against Duplessis. That's at plus 331 for those 3 fights. I just don't see any of those fights. The only one that I'm sort of questionable on is the Strickland, and I know I'm going into the weeds here on Shavkat, but the only one I'm kind of questioning is the fight with Duplessis and Strickland, because I know Duplessis just got his nose fixed, and it seems like there could be some interesting things there. But I think the only way you can play Shavkat here, unfortunately, is you got to play it in an awkward-ass parlay that probably stretches out because you're just not going to get any value for it. And I just don't see Wonder Boy, as fun as he has been to watch in the last couple of years, I just don't think he has a chance. So I'll shut up now and see what you guys have to think.
I think it's very funny that on the same card, I've got the fade the cold sore play, and you've got the fade the nose job play. So I'm glad that we're going that route. I've got Shavkat to win the fight as well. I don't think there's any chance in the world for Wonder Boy, unfortunately, but salute to a great career. I don't know if this will be the last one for him or not. I mean, he seems like he's still in high spirits despite the age. He still looks like a freak of nature and shape. But, yeah, no play for me on this one because I was going to eye the submission and inside the distance odds. Just not what I'm looking for in that market. Rick, what are you going with here?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have a great read on as far as the pick at good odds. Minus 650 for Shavkat's too much. Shavkat inside the distance is minus 220. Still too much. Stephen Wonderboy has been pretty durable throughout his career. But I do think that Shavkat dominates. Thompson continues to struggle against takedowns. He's allowed 12 in his last 3 fights. He did 2 against Holland, who broke his hand, and Holland sort of required it. And it was a little weird, but 7 against Bilal, 3 against Gilbert. But I just think Rachmanov is basically he's what Muhammad Makayev wishes he was. He's Muhammad Makayev with power and with submission ability that Muhammad Makayev does not have. And so he is that Rolls Royce as far as a prospect goes that is continuing to add elements to his game and improve the weaknesses in a similar way to who were we speaking on earlier in the card? Goodness. Ignore me. He continues to improve his different skills too that he lacks and just really strengthen up those good ones. So he's the complete prospect. We've touched on it a good bit. I've got Shavkat, but no bet.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to drag this out too far, but I do think there is a discussion we can have here. And I think all the fans think it at some point as they're in their fandom, and that is just the analytics and the ability to tap into some of the things that you can do if you want to do it. If you're driven to be a data-driven fighter, you can be progressing like these guys are, and you see it with like the return of Roundtree. You see it with the Sarukian. You see it with a Shavkat type of fighter where it's like they're exploiting every single thing the tape will give them, and they're really going to the gym and going to the camp like heavy, like saying, I can be the best in the world, and I'm going to do it strategically. I feel like this is the first time in this sport where you can see it across multiple divisions in the top 5 across the board. Like it feels like it's across the board now. I've never seen it like that. And so I feel like that's a greater discussion that we could have, but I just feel like it's so cool to watch fighters progress so much in between fights.
Absolutely. Yeah. I can't wait to see where he progresses into who he's going to fight next after this one, because there will be a shakeup here at the top of the division. Either Rocky Edwards or Colby Covington will fall down after one loses, or you can take on someone like Gilbert Trino Burns if he wins in his fight against Jack Della Maddalena in March, or someone like Bilal Muhammad, who is the boogeyman right now that nobody wants to fight, so much so they had to make him the backup for the headliner. So a lot of different cool options with Shavkat for sure. But Ben, as always, brother, appreciate you giving your input on the pod. We are all rocking with Shavkat Rachmanov on this one. And we are now heading into the title fights, ladies and gentlemen. Up next, we have the flyweight championship of the world between Alexandre Pantoja and Brandon Royval. Stay locked in with us as we keep on going with UFC 296. Hey, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to Pilsners and Prelims, a UFC betting podcast by Happy Hour Sports. Just want to ask if you could like and subscribe to the video if you like the content that we're putting out, and be sure to stay tuned to what we have coming up in the future. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you on the other side. And in our co-main event for UFC 296, we have Alexandre Pantoja at around minus 165 odds, taking on Brandon Royval at plus 140 for the 125-pounder championship of the UFC. Pantoja, the story's been out on this guy, man. His skills are insane. He's one of the most well-rounded and great at every level fighters that you will see, regardless of the division. And it adds into what you've always said about the flyweight division, Rick. You take a look at the polar opposite of them, heavyweight. If you are good at one thing, you will be a ranked heavyweight fighter. In flyweight, you have to be super well-rounded because it is impossible to finish dudes when they weigh that low in how many pounds they are. Pantoja can wrestle. He's got high-level Brazilian jiu-jitsu. He slows down a bit in the final 2 rounds. My only complaint against him that I saw in some of his more recent fights, I feel like he slows just a little bit. But, I mean, that's something that as he continues to fight more 5-round fights, he will grow into. He will be fine. I think the striking is great with him too. The thing is, this one's really interesting because, yes, he beat Royval the last time out. This is a rematch indeed. But Royval is the chaos master. And I touched on it in the preview of the podcast in the first few minutes. That should be Royval's nickname, man. Fuck Raw Dog. He should be chaos, not Colby Covington. He's great in crazy situations. And he loves throwing the elbows and knees to create that shitstorm of what's going on in the octagon. However, the chaos can bite him in the ass if he gets caught. And I think that's where I kind of give Pantoja the edge. But on one last thing, I'll kick it over to you. In the last fight, Royval looked really solid against him. Like, he looked like he was doing great work. And then Pantoja caught him because of the chaos. Like, he found that gap and was able to submit him. So kind of interested to hear what you think on this one because I know you're a huge Pantoja fan, but also you and I both are fans of Royval's game too. We have to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I love both these guys. And it's a shame that, I mean, I've ridden Pantoja all the way to the top, picked him as a big dog or a sizable dog against Brandon Moreno, as well as Alex Perez, where he was a favorite, and Royval in that first matchup as well. So 3-0 picking my last 3 fights for Pantoja. But, I mean, it's an incredible test with Royval. And as you mentioned, we didn't really get much time in that first matchup because the finish was so quick. And we could likely see something similar to this in this matchup as well, because while Royval was finished in that first matchup, and it looks on paper like, all right, you were choked out in the second round, like probably got dominated in that matchup. If you watch that fight, you understand just how slippery both these guys are. And like you said, it's the scrambles where Royval is on a different level than pretty much anybody else. Like, I would say Aljamain Sterling is right there with him as far as just the speed and like that propensity to, as soon as you get into a bad situation or as soon as that guy tries to reverse, you're already 2 steps ahead. You're already swinging around to get that other leg. And there's few that are as quick as Royval in that sense, and as lethal as well. The only person that I would say is more lethal in this division is Pantoja. He is a finisher to the highest degree, as is Royval, obviously. Royval 7 finishes in his 8 UFC fights. Just as you were saying with the heavyweights, where it's one skill masters all, and flyweight, it's you have to have a little bit of everything. Similar in the same sense that in heavyweights you're always getting finishes. In flyweights, you don't really get any finishes. You got 2 guys that have an incredible amount of finishes on their record. And I think that we see one here again tonight. But I think that we could have a really, really close fight on our hands. I don't think the odds really reflect that well enough. Royval now 5-2 in his UFC run. Could have been 6-1. The Brandon Moreno fight, he had a shoulder injury back in that first round. I'm not gonna say he would have won that fight. He probably would have lost that fight, for being honest. But you don't know, and you don't know, especially in flyweight. But then he had the Pantoja loss, which obviously aged very well. But then he finished Matt Schnell in the first round, and then he finished Mateus Nicolau in the first round. So he just continues to be able to get it done. On the feet, he can get it done pretty much in any way. He's got nasty elbows and knees, whether that be from the clinch, but he can use some elbows at range as well. And what I like about him, and what you like to know but you don't like to be reminded of, is that he can eat power shots. You don't like to know. I mean, you like to know that they can eat a power shot. You don't like to see it and be like, oh, shit. Oh, well, he ate it. Oh, like, it happens too much. Eventually, you're like, well, shit, he's just going to get slept.
There's
But
his chin.
yeah. He has a chin. Good. Okay. We don't need to be reminded. But yeah, I think this fight is just an incredibly tough fight. And because of that, I like the dog. I like Royval at plus 160. I think it's still there. That's what I got it at last night. Let me double check to make sure it hasn't moved. Yep, still sitting around plus 160. So that's where it's been sitting. And I just think that this is about as coin flippy of a fight as it could possibly be. Both guys have good power. Both guys are fast. And the reason that I give Royval the edge is not because of anything technical, not because of his ability on the ground versus anything else. It's because of Pantoja's speech at the end of his championship fight. Like, he was crying. He was crying after that fight for his dad. It feels like he's made it to his peak. It feels like he's done it. Like, he's like, all right, like, that's what I've been looking for. I did it for my dad. Like, what now? And I think that Royval is very much on that, like, all right, I'm the next champion. I have that, like, bread, that hunger, that fire in my belly that I think Pantoja might not for this fight. And in a coin flip fight, I'll take that guy who's eager and desperate for that victory over the guy that's probably been being paraded around Brazil, that's been happy. And granted, I'm sure he wants to keep his belt, but these two guys are like for like. They're both elite. And we might have this continue to happen at the flyweight division, but I think that Royval's got just as good a chance as Pantoja to win this fight. So I know it took up a lot of time there, but Andy, what do you like?
I'm glad you did, because you are like super knowledgeable about the top of the flyweight division, and I'll be the first one to admit that. I am a Brandon Moreno homer, so I'm not the biggest Pantoja guy, but I actually am going to go with Pantoja as my pick in this one. I think Pantoja is just a tick above Royval in the sense that he is a more skilled mixed martial artist. I feel like he is spectacular on the ground, where Royval has no chance of submitting him on the ground. I think Royval's best chance to win is going to be on the feet, finding some awkward angles, and putting his lights out. What I do think with Pantoja is that he's not going to let that happen. I've seen a lot of stuff where it's like, yeah, Royval looked really good against Pantoja the last time they fought, and then Pantoja caught him. I mean, who's to say? That was 2 years ago. So who's to say Pantoja hasn't taken the time, gotten better? We know for a fact he's become a better fighter and has become the champion of the division, and has now like reviewed that tape so many times and probably feels like he did lose that fight. I mean, that is one where you kind of feel like, oh shit, like if you're a Royval better there, it's like, damn, I thought I had it there. But I think that he's going to make the necessary improvements to be ready to weather this storm. I agree with you. Like, there is a worry for me that he has like hit his peak, but it's just one of those where I feel it deep down in my gut with Pantoja. And because the odds have moved from around plus 200 when it opened up to around plus 160 where you're grabbing it now, I'm not going to bet it yet. So make sure to follow me on Twitter at AndyHH Sports. I will tweet out my play for this one if I end up siding with Pantoja and the juices where I like it, because I do like him to maintain the belt, and we will see. And still. So Rick and I are splitting picks here. He's got Royval to win as well as he's picking him. I'm going the opposite way. I'm picking Pantoja, but not yet placing my bet because I think that juice might come down just a little bit where it's more affordable. If you like Rick's side, make sure to go ahead and get it because it is moving. Like we said, it was plus 200. Now it's down to plus 160. Who's to say where it's going to wind up? Rick, we're on to the final one. Oh, go ahead.
And before we move on to that final one, I've got that Royval for one unit at plus 160. I am going to take the opposite of what pretty much everyone's been saying that I've been listening to, that I follow on Twitter, that I see on forums. And I've got Royval by submission, plus 675. I think that they can get in a slippery situation. I think he can sink it in. I think that this could be his moment. And I know Pantoja's as damn good as it gets on the mat. I think this could be one of those like jaw-dropping moments where Royval is able to just sink in a rear naked choke. They scramble, whatever it may be, and he's able to lock it in. So I'll take Royval by sub for a quarter unit at plus 675. In addition to that, probably tossing it in the garbage, but I've got much like you have a feeling on Pantoja. I sort of got a feeling that Royval is able to finish him here. So, but anyways, both of us split on the pick, as you said. On to the main event where we have Nerds and Virgins, Colby Covington, facing England's finest, Leon Edwards. We'll see you there.
And finally, our final fight of the year in the UFC. We have Colby Chaos Covington taking on Leon Rocky Edwards. Colby, you can get anywhere from plus 125 to plus 140, depending on where you shop. And Leon is anywhere from minus 156 to minus 165 from what I've seen. This is Colby's first fight back since March of last year. We fought Jorge Masvidal. And Rick, I texted to you when I was watching tape. Jorge Masvidal looked absolutely useless and terrible against Covington. I hadn't watched that fight since I watched it the first time, to be honest with you. And God, I'm glad that I did not, because it's just Colby being Colby. Jorge did catch Colby with one that was pretty bad, where like he dropped Colby. Then he let him get back up and then just kind of stood there and panted like a dog waiting for something to happen. And I don't know why he didn't follow that up. It was similar with how Nate Diaz shook Leon and then just didn't follow it up. But anywho, Colby's always going to use his cardio as a weapon. Don't let him fool you. Those girls he hangs out with, he pays for. So it's not with them that he's getting the cardio, but he does. And when he calls himself the cardio king, he's not joking, man. It is ultimately his biggest weapon. The guy is going to try to hold Leon down or hold him against the cage and slowly work the submission game, making Leon's chances of knocking Colby out limited and far between. But the question of if we still hear Bruce Buffer yell and still hinges on one thing for me, and that is how is Leon Edwards' defensive wrestling game. So Leon trains out of Renegade Jiu-Jitsu. He's great with the lead head kick. He's great with the boxing. He's got awesome body kicks. And one thing that I want to note before I let you go and say your thing is I am a little worried about how often he's going to be held up against the cage, because Leon's last time out against Kamaru Usman, he got a point deduction for grabbing onto the cage. And if that's hopefully that's a habit they've drilled into him to not do that, but he's going to be up against the cage a lot here. And I do worry about that for him. Where if there was like a juicy, like get a point deduction prop somewhere, I'd be looking at just laying a couple bucks on that. But interested to hear your thoughts on the main event here. I can't wait for this one personally.
Yeah, I think that I don't want to sound less excited than I am for this fight, because I'm very excited for this fight. I think that we could have another Edwards-Usman fight where it goes 5 rounds. You get a lot of grappling, a lot of clinch along the fence, because Colby doesn't want to stand and trade at range. Like, he knows he's the worst fighter at range. He knows the power that Edwards has. But with Edwards, he came in with that kickboxing background, as you mentioned, and he looked good in the defensive wrestling against Usman. He took him down in the first round of that first fight, which to the surprise of everybody. But he then struggled to be able to get himself off the cage. And throughout his UFC career, he sort of made an art out of being defensive on the feet and not getting touched, but then just being able to pepper other guys throughout rounds because he's not the highest volume guy. But his wrestling and BJJ defense has continued to improve throughout his career. But he sort of had a tailor-made career to make a run up the rankings, where early in his career, he had a lot of easier fights. He lost his debut against Claudio Silva, had a couple easier fights, lost to Usman. But then he went on that run. And his run, he fought Luque, which is a tough fight, Barberena, an older Donald Cerrone, an older Gunnar Nelson who was injured, RDA in his prime, Shore beat an old Nate Diaz, and then obviously the Usman fights. So it's and honestly, the Bilal Muhammad fight where he had the eye poke, it could have been a disqualification. It was so bad. But that fight was a no contest regardless. But, I think that everyone is a little bit too over the top about Usman's skills right now. And overly wooed by his ability to not be taken down by Usman. And people are saying, well, he didn't get taken down by Usman. He went 2-0 against him. Usman beat Colby. So clearly Colby's going to be less of a test than Usman was, and Usman wasn't much of a test. I don't think that's the case. And I don't think that's the case because Usman is clearly regressing. Usman is still elite. Don't get me wrong. But Usman is not the Usman that we all remember him as, where it is wrestling to the nines, it is striking. It has enough power to scare people. Colby doesn't have the striking that Usman has, in my opinion. Obviously, he lost to Usman twice as well. But I do think that last almost 2 years off is probably a good thing for Colby. Whereas time off for most fighters, I'm like, with Colby and with who's the other fighter on this card that took a little bit of a layoff after? Oh, Luque. With Colby and Luque, they felt intentionally and intelligent, where they're like, hey, let's recover. Let's make sure we're right. Let's get tested. With Colby, obviously, he had the Masvidal incident as well, where he got clocked, and so he probably wanted to recover a little bit from that as well. But he's done a good job. It seems like he's focused, and he's always had his eyes on getting that full-time title. So I think that Colby's going to be ready to run. My issue with Colby is he pretty much has one path to victory, and that's wrestling. I don't see him on the feet being able to get the better of Usman at all, or of Edwards at all. So if Edwards is able to stifle the takedowns like he was against Usman, I think that we've got a pretty easy path to victory for Edwards. But Whether he's able to do that, that's a very different test because Covington is relentless, man. And you mentioned it with that cardio. So where do you even go with this fight?
I think that you're discrediting Leon's resume a little bit, and it's because he had such a big layoff during COVID where he got screwed by COVID and then screwed by Kamzat getting COVID. He got screwed by the eye poke with Bilal, and then the only person that would take a fight with him is Nate Diaz. And then the Nate Diaz thing happened, and then he had to sit and wait for almost for 14 months after that to then get the fight with Usman. So he's had so much time off because nobody wanted to fight him. There wasn't a ton for them to gain. And I feel like he took that time and bettered his game to the point where he then was able to topple that mountain of Kamaru Usman. Now, like, there are certain points I definitely agree with, but I do think that he has made his game more well-rounded, where it's going to be difficult for Colby because Colby did not look great against Kamaru Usman his second to last time out. He got a Tyron Woodley on the back half of Woodley's career. And then he ultimately got finished by Usman in the first time out. And that was in 2019. Like, he hasn't had a ton of MMA action. And when it has been, it's been either fighting for the belt against Usman, Woodley, or Masvidal. And Masvidal looked like dog shit in that fight, in my opinion, where it wasn't even tested. And honestly, like, Colby left himself open at times where I feel like Leon's going to be able to find those windows, find those gaps in Colby's striking defense, or even though they might be few and far between, there's ample opportunity for Leon to maybe not necessarily put his lights out, but to put some damage on him. And I can guarantee you, unlike Jorge Masvidal, Leon is going to follow up and start putting even more damage on him after he wobbles Colby with one. I love Leon in this spot. I thought I was going to go Colby for weeks, but ultimately, like, with my research and what I've been able to kind of come up with here, I do like Leon. And this is one, talked about it all card, that there's some expensive plays where if you want to take one of the favorites, you have to do it. I resisted all along. And now for the final fight of the year, I am going to do it. I'm taking Leon Edwards at the best price available, minus 156 on FanDuel for a unit. And he is my pick to win. And we're going to have 2 and stills with Pantoja and Leon Edwards to end the year. Rick, which way are you going? 'Cause I couldn't really tell from what you were saying, but I did think that you brought up some really solid points.
Yeah, I didn't really have a lean going into this. I haven't really been able to decide on this fight. My head almost tells me Edwards, just given all of the different MMA math, if nothing else, just to say, hey, well, you know. But you're right about, like, him. Like, his resume should be better than it is. Edwards. He had nobody wanted to take a fight. He had all that layoff, whatnot, and he still has had some very good opponents. But I'm going to end up going Edwards here because Colby's only path to victory is the wrestling. And if he isn't able to achieve that, I don't see him winning. Even if Edwards gets wrestled for a round or two, I think he still has a very good chance to win this fight. And so there just are more avenues, and I think, like, a better odds at those avenues for Edwards to win than there are for Colby. And so because of that, I've got Edwards in this fight, but
the sporadic time off.
I would much rather an interview with Joe Rogan and Colby than I would an interview with Joe Rogan and Edwards. But I'm not going to put my money behind my desires there because that's what you shouldn't do. I'll wait until midnight Eastern time, and then I'll put my money where my heart is, and then I'll be sad when Colby gets slept. Is what will probably ended up happening. But
yeah, I thought we were going to get the picture that's been swirling around the back half of this year of both Sean's with the belt and Colby. I thought we were going to get a picture of all three, but now Colby's been shit-talking Sean this week, saying he wants to move up to 185 after this and go fight Sean. How often does that work out? When you're the person fighting for the belt and you're calling out someone in the next division? That hardly ever works out. And now I think Leon might want to move up too. It's ridiculous. You need to defend the belt a bunch of times before you can move up and down. We got to stop that. But yeah, it sounds like we're both Rocky here.
Yeah, I'm Rocky. Yeah, no official bet for me on the main event. I think it's the first one I've had no bet on the main event. I lean towards, ironically, fight not to go the distance at plus 155. I just feel like one of these guys is going to end up getting clipped or slept, choked out potentially if Colby's able to get it. But I don't have a great read on this fight. I got to be honest. I don't have a great read.
I think
Colby might have leveled up his game in the 2 years off as well. And so I don't know what strides he's made, but I do think he's probably recovered a bit and is taking this fight very seriously. So I'm not sure.
Yeah, totally get it. Totally get it. I think that's a good lesson to depart with, is that even though it's the main event, it doesn't mean you have to take a bet on it. That's sometimes smart as placing. Sometimes you're smart. Yeah, and he's detracting from my point, folks. He's detracting from my point. All right, we are both going with Leon Rocky Edwards. Yeah. So we will see. We will see what happens here if we get a Leon Rocky Edwards, or if Colby Covington is going to impress his hero Donald Trump, who will be in attendance for this one. Guys, it has been an awesome fall getting this podcast back up and running. Can't thank you all enough for listening. Again, you've heard me say it before, but please like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoy the show. If you made it this far, or if you're just watching this final clip, what's up? But really excited to kind of put some stuff together for next year. And the channel won't be done during the next few weeks off. We will have some interesting conversation topics between the three of us that we'll continue to be thinking of MMA. We'll have all kinds of ideas for what's going to be coming up next year too, and can't wait to talk to you guys about it. Rick, any words of wisdom to leave the people with before you depart for the next 4 weeks in the regards of giving picks out?
As far as picks go, nothing at the moment. Make sure to follow us both on Twitter. I tweeted out my card last week, and I'll probably end up tweeting out the plays that I didn't put out on this one as I continue just to look at the odds, look at the lines as they continue to come out, and be able to hammer those. But yeah, make sure to follow us there on Twitter, on all social medias, and please do comment if you're watching on YouTube. If you're watching on Spotify, go to YouTube, subscribe, and then comment on this video with any ideas of topics that you want us to dive into, whether that be topics that you want us to research and really dig into, or just conversational topics that you're interested in. We're more than happy to talk about it, and would love to do it with you guys. So I appreciate each of you guys listening in from the bottom of our heart, from me, Andy, and Ben as well. Merry Christmas if you celebrate Christmas. Happy Hanukkah, Happy Kwanzaa, Happy New Year, and we will see you guys in the coming weeks. Hopefully.
Yep. Love you all.
I was going to say hopefully we get a Colby win, but I don't know if I want that. So I had to pause for a second and really rethink my life. But goodbye, nerds.
I wanted to say
we will see you in 2024.
Let's hope that instead of Hot Girl Summer, it's White Boy Winter, I guess. I don't know. We'll see. But adios, everyone.
Bye, everyone.